Welcome to the Look-See for March 2025. So I'm here at the Westin Hotel in Ottawa, Canada, at Jean-Claude's Beyond Mystic Woo conference. And I've really enjoyed it. The lighting is not what I'm used to, and the sound is probably not going to be as good as it usually is, but I'm really excited to be here. So I usually begin the look-see by asking, what's happening in our world? And what kinds of attitudes or changes are coming our way? I also ask for a keyword for the month. And this month it was boat ride. Boat ride. So I wasn't sure what to make of that, but a boat is a vehicle that offers a way to travel or move ahead without any firm ground to stand on. You know, boats keep people afloat. And since water is the universal symbol of emotion, boats help people avoid drowning in emotion. So maybe that's the message. When doing the look-see, usually I really only want to see the physical events so I can report things that everyone else can see. But this month, I kept seeing a lot of the mental, emotional, and spiritual changes coming our way. At first, I kept brushing those things aside, but then I finally realized that maybe the keyword boat ride was a hint that what I would be seeing was the need to navigate big emotions. And perhaps that was what was needing to be shared. So the result is that this month, there's a lot of information about our mental, emotional, and spiritual situation. And I hope you'll be able to get something good from it. So let's begin. Number one, I want to start with a brief reminder of something that I have mentioned several times in the past 3 years. We are fighting a planetary takeover that was started a long time ago by a group of humanoid beings, extraterrestrial people from elsewhere in a galaxy. Now, I know that sounds pretty far out there, but that is what's happening. The ETs always start this takeover process by interfering in a somewhat isolated village where they cause some form of trauma in the families living there. And the children are usually the ones traumatized. Then those children grow up to be like distorted adults who are tracked and helped to take unfair, even abusive advantage of others. They often have children of their own who inherit and copy their distorted ideas and behaviors. And this continues for many generations until there's a large enough population of people who tend toward borderline personalities, sociopathic, and even psychopathic behaviors. As mentioned, these maladjusted people get into positions of power, partly because they don't mind hurting others, and partly because they are being helped by the people from other planetary systems. During this time, when the population is building, religion is introduced to bring about mental and emotional conformity. And once there's a sufficient population of maladjusted people who conform mentally and emotionally, the corporation is introduced. The corporation. Yeah, the corporation. It's the main tool in the takeover, and it's used to bring about physical conformity, gradually cutting people off from nature, both Mother Nature and human nature. Once mental, emotional, and physical conformity are achieved, and independence has been greatly undermined, the rug is pulled out from under people using war or a massive shock. And the entire reality just collapses. The entire population just doesn't know what to do. Those who are able to survive physically, to manage their feelings, and to think clearly about what's happening are often too few in number to mount much resistance. And in their desire to survive, they are easily manipulated into positions and jobs set up by those who are in control. So it's important to note that people are the same all over the cosmos. They may look different, talk different, or have fancy technology, but unless they are highly developed ethically and spiritually, they are interested in the same kinds of things that people here on Earth are interested in: business, trade, power, and territory with some good resources on it. Earth has all the resources that anyone from anywhere else would be interested in. There's a population of people who make good slaves. There's a huge variety of DNA, which is always sought as a top trade item. There's a variety of base metals, a decent climate for settlers, and a relatively quiet star. We have a quiet star compared to others that might undergo a micronova every dozen years, or even every 20 years, or even less, 8 years. Our micronova only happens every 12,000, say 500, 12,500 years. So the bottom line, a group of people from another star system infiltrated our governance and financial systems a long time ago and began manipulating Earth humans, humans who would do the dirty work of making the takeover complete. The main group of extraterrestrial manipulators actually left a couple of years ago when they decided they could not win. Why? Because too many people were waking up. They were waking up to what was happening. However, those running the corporate structures left behind then decided they would take over. Some of them are already trading slaves, DNA, and metals with races of people from off-planet. When Donald Trump first took on the task of draining the swamp, he did not have a good grasp of what he would be taking on. It was not just some corruption in the capital cities of the West. It was thousands of years of insidious betrayal of the people of Earth by their own fellows, all of them being controlled by hidden extraterrestrials who were pulling the strings of leaders around the world. Why did these leaders give in so easily? Because they didn't think they could win against the takeover. Because the hidden network was too big, and they never knew who might take them out for knowing too much, so they pretended ignorance. They also got caught up in the takeover because the money was too good and the security too sweet. They didn't have the emotional intelligence, the mental clarity, the guts, or the creativity to take a stand. And then there was this whole thing about timing. When would it be time to take a stand? So, where are we today? Shortly after the election of Donald Trump, I was looking at our future and I saw that by the end of this year, people had turned against him and the government. This turning was also the case in a number of Western countries. I was stunned by this. I could not imagine what would happen to cause such a dramatic change in the hearts and minds of the people. So for months, I was asking, what happens? Why are we fighting the very governments we worked so hard to win? There are several answers to these questions so far. And one is that the good people of the West have no idea how big the stakes are. It's about the planet. All they see is the destruction of their country by immigrant invaders, or the destruction of the financial system by greedy bankers, maybe the loss of tens of thousands of jobs, some of them ended by Trump in an effort to avoid the bankruptcy of the United States, and the network of rules, regulations, and lies by the corrupt media, which is owned by the rich criminals who used to be running things, and in some cases still are. This is a dangerous state of affairs. We are likely to take ourselves out with our own anger. The one thing we cannot afford right now is the thought that we can't win. We are winning, but it's important to see that we aren't going to win back the old systems because we aren't going to want them. What does it mean to win? It means being willing to develop a new way of looking at the world and thinking about what we want. It means a new way of looking at life itself. It means peace of mind, working together, taking charge of daily life, coming up with all the things we need to stay warm or cool, well fed, and with a dry bed to sleep in, and a means to stay in touch with one another. It means having people around us who share the work and have a can-do attitude when it comes to problem solving. Winning means hanging on to our ethics and values, having a sense of humor, a sense of adventure, and some openness to what is new. It means celebrating the good things of the past with a little nostalgia, instead of being lost in resentment about the things that weren't so good. To win means seeing the new ways that are possible and embracing the opportunities that come along. Winning means understanding that we have undeveloped capacities and then getting excited about those capacities and transforming ourselves to become new humans. Most of all, it means a deep gratitude for life, for the wisdom life offers, and the love that life is based on. And then there's the recognition that we are moving into a new dimension of existence. Number 2, I think that most of us here in the US wanted the corruption cleaned up. We wanted the swamp to be drained, but very few realized that the whole thing was a swamp and they were living in it. Washington, D.C. was originally built on property that was donated to the country because it was a swamp. And sometimes I wonder if that was an omen. It's not very often that something is both literally and metaphorically true. So millions of people have been living quite comfortably thanks to swamp jobs that paid them handsomely and made them think they were being successful. Now, the jobs that kept people busy continue to be lost by the thousands. And this is the result of cleaning the swamp. So what will become of this? I can see at least a few outcomes. One is the realization, in at least some people, that there's a big difference between pushing buttons on a computer versus actually producing something useful, something that truly sustains you. Another outcome is the realization that asks, was the government buying my support by offering a fat paycheck? That's a painful question. Yet another is the sickening realization that the kind of governance system we have is particularly susceptible to the kind of corruption we are seeing. Is there any sense in restoring such a system if it's just going to keep sliding into corruption? We've known for a long time that democracy is just mob rule and whoever is in power does whatever they want. That's why our founding fathers set up a republic. But if the flaw in the Republican soup is the corrupt habit of buying votes to stay in power, what's the point? What's beyond a Democratic or Republican system? Can we even begin to imagine something like that? I think we need to. Number 3. There are some people who are just plain good at what they do because of how they think. And Tom Renz is one of them. His recent research into the Department of Government Efficiency, all because he doesn't trust the media and so he had to investigate for himself, revealed that the media just was not telling the truth about Doge. I'm sure you've heard this, but I had to mention it. Doge is not an agency created by one of Trump's executive orders. It was an agency originally created by Obama called the U.S. Digital Services. And Obama was going to use it for several things. First, to modernize the software government was using. Next, to improve the efficiency of network infrastructure. And third, to update information technology systems. It was also, of course, going to be used to set up digital identification and a few other things, but Trump took it, renamed it, hired different tech guys, and started the improved efficiency process. Now everyone is freaking out. So take a breath, people. Let things unfold, but pay attention. Number 4. An interesting article in the Epoch Times noted that California land is sinking in some places at a rate of 0.4 inches per year. That's a lot. That's almost a half an inch. In a decade, it adds up to 4 inches. And that's without any earthquakes to make things worse. In other places, land is rising. So, wow. Imagine that you built a home and one corner of it was on land that was sinking. Your entire foundation could crack, and one corner could begin to sink, causing serious damage to walls, water lines, or gas lines. Doors might refuse to open or close because the door frame is out of square. Windows might refuse to open for the same reason. Of course, we've all seen video of the collapse of big, beautiful homes on the big, beautiful edge of the Pacific Ocean. So what should we take from this? First, the symbolism, which is that something is slowly sinking away. Of course, literally, it tells us that California land is sinking, but symbolically, it is saying California is sinking. Sinking into what? Maybe chaos? However you want to look at it, this is a reminder that the earth is always, always moving, always changing. And we should not expect things to stay the same all the time, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. Then there is the symbolic message that maybe we should be aware that the basic systems we've always relied on, systems that give us a sense of security, are changing. And we should make sure we remain flexible and prepared. When the landscape changes, it's time to rethink where we live, the kinds of houses we construct, how well we know Mother Nature. And do we need to be more mobile, less fixed? The original Native Americans lived a simple, mobile life for a reason. Think about that. Number 5. Speaking of California, their fruit came up, and with it, a declaration of disaster. It looked like an entire region of food producers was severely impacted. And the more I looked at this, the more I thought, maybe that's just Moss Landing, the place where a fire in a lithium battery plant had been. I stayed focused on this, but it wasn't the fire that held my attention or the fact that the fire had been deliberately started. It was the deliberate attempt to accomplish two things. One was the effort to hurt Tesla and Musk, and the other was to disrupt the harvest operations going on in that area by declaring mandatory evacuations, leaving no access to some of the crops. Mother Nature doesn't wait. When it's ripe, it has to be picked. Anyway, there was a third unexpected side benefit for the globalists in that not only were the lettuces and berries covered with toxic ash, that ash will affect soil quality in unknown ways in the future. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Get to know your local growers, my friends, because the people attempting to interfere with our food sources just discovered a new way to disrupt things. Number 6. Social Security in the US came up, and with it, I had a clear vision of a major crossroads. That crossroads actually resembled like the size and shape of the cross in the logo of the Red Cross, but it was surrounded by what looked like a vortex of energy. The crossroads were sinking into the vortex, and when I asked about the time frame of this, I got the answer about 6 months from now. It looked like the funding of Social Security was going through a serious crisis, and there was a big argument. I've heard a couple stories about what Elon Musk is finding in the Social Security records, but 6 months from now, one side of the argument will be, it isn't going to be there for people, so why do we keep taking money out of their paychecks? The other side of the argument will be, well, we should start something new, something better, and stop trying to keep this thing alive. There aren't enough people working, so why don't we put the money into something new? It was as if both sides were really saying there was no sense in collecting Social Security anymore. But one side just wanted to stop any of that kind of activity, and the other wanted to start something and collect for that new thing. I don't think they can stop collecting because too many people are living on Social Security, but I do think they should sharpen their pencils, figure out when the majority of people collecting Social Security will no longer be around, and set an end date for payments and one for collections, giving everyone plenty of notice. Number 7. Teachers were the next to come up, and there were some really big arguments in and around the Department of Education. It looks like Trump does actually cut a lot of their money, and those cuts are very close to happening. There was a lot of scrambling around inside the department, and a lot of people were fired. By the time this look-see is posted, those cuts might already be done. A lot of special education programs were cut, but the thing that interested me most was the fallout of the changes in this department and education in general. One big fallout was that contracts with big textbook publishers are not renewed, causing spillover drama in that area. Many states also were scrambling to organize a whole new approach to education. I could hear questions by those in state capitals who were asking, well, who's known as a great teacher? Who has a grasp of education theory? Who do we know that's willing to head up a study group to reassess our educational policy in this state? There were lots of other questions, but those were the most passionate. So for some teachers, there is no summer off. Sorry. So there's no summer off. The long-term prospect for teachers is that many are out of work. Many others become what you might call professional educators who work on a contract basis. Others start their own school. Talk about schools of choice. Wow. So I moved forward in time a little and I saw that in the future, states advertise the kind of education they offer as if looking for residents to come and live there. And people are looking for places to live where the state has certain financial benefits, educational approaches, food policies, medical benefits, and things like that. People are grouping together based on what they need in life and who has it. And states look like they were trying to attract population. Okay, number 8. I saw one of the media chains closing. The problem, it was their news and the way they presented it. It looked like there was some sort of cut and paste scandal as part of a concocted story. And my first reaction was, wow, God, they've been doing that for years. So what's new? But this small scandal was like a last straw. And they decided to close. So actually, whoever owned it decided he was no longer interested in losing money. I thought it could be CNN at first, but I wasn't sure. It looked too small and too insignificant to be CNN. But then later on, I wondered if CNN had shrunk to the point where they were hardly recognizable. Number 9. The Amish came up, and I could see some quiet uproar in an Amish community in the eastern part of the US. I thought maybe it was Pennsylvania. It had to do with like the Amish having become very popular, and they were overwhelmed. The community was overwhelmed with people, contacts, demands, injuries, requests for help and for healing and for food and for information on how they do things. So the Amish dilemma was threefold. First, should they share freely? Or should they demand that people conform to their community and their rules in order to get help? And third, should they change how they see the world and how they do things? The questions they were trying to answer in themselves were, well, how much change in the world can happen without affecting our way of life? Should we modernize a little? Should we modernize a lot? They were deeply unsettled and asking what their purpose was. But I'm just going to say, I thought it was to do exactly what they were doing. Maintaining a solid way of life that was in full relationship to Earth and Mother Nature, so they could show people a path that was doable, workable, and would provide some security as things we have always relied on stop working. The Amish have kept their way of life all this time just to be a lifeline for the world. They are here to demonstrate that even if the whole system falls apart, this is what you can do. Number 10. After clearing my mind of the Amish and their dilemma, I again asked the question, so what is happening over the next month or two? And a scene came up that was very simple. It was an expanse of ocean, a huge expanse of ocean. All I could see in that ocean was the wake of a ship. I didn't see the ship. It was as if it had already passed, but you could still see the ripples and the wake left behind. At the same time as knowing the ship had already passed, Yet, almost counter to that recent passing, I had the impression that the ship was steaming toward us and was drawing close to the western shores. I had the feeling that it would cause chaos and that it had people on it who were soldiers or were soldiering on. I heard the word soldiering. So, you know how sometimes in dreams you have perceptions that don't quite go together logically? That's how this was. Here's this wake, the ship has passed, but it's coming right at us. There seemed to be many doubts and a million questions about the ship. I wasn't sure what to make of this scene, so I moved on. But then I came back to it when it struck me that the word wake might be the whole message. A wake is something that follows a death. I'm not sure if this was a hint about someone important dying and leaving us with a loss of leadership or what. A little more reflection, and it occurred to me that maybe it was the ship of state that had died, and the wake was both literal and symbolic. Literal in the sense that we would mourn and be without leadership or a working country, and symbolic in the sense of the need for all to wake to the truth of our situation, which may be that it's up to us to lead ourselves. Are you ready? Number 11. I find the stories of missing gold to be a deja vu from decades ago. I can't remember when I first heard that there was no gold in Fort Knox, but it had to be at least 35 or 40 years ago, maybe 45 or 50. I think those of us who read those stories assumed that Bush Sr. had somehow made off with the gold and it was hidden somewhere in South America. So, heads up. I don't think we should be surprised if there is no gold in Fort Knox. Number 12. Chemtrails came up. And it was because chemtrails may come under investigation. What I saw was that someone in the new administration was asking about chemtrails and saying, can we get an investigation going? The attention on this problem led to looking at the supply chain, the stuff that they need to produce the sprays. There was some effort to disrupt the supply, which led to a couple of bioweapon facilities underground. And I thought at least one of those facilities was in Canada. There were more in Ukraine. It looked like there was a bigger fight coming around this problem. And I was very happy to see that fight coming. Okay, I so want the chemtrails to end. Number 13. China is going through their own version of a women's liberation movement, sort of. On February 1st, it became law in China that what you owned before going into marriage cannot be shared or taken away in divorce settlements. So evidently, it used to be common for a woman to marry anyone at all and then divorce him a few months later and take half of the assets. Men were doing the same thing if the woman was a successful businesswoman or someone who inherited great wealth. It was also common for parents to buy their child a home only to watch the home be lost as a family asset when the child married and then divorced. So in the conversations about this new law, I also listened to several Chinese women talk about the need to value their work as mothers, taking care of children, keeping the house clean and organized, and staying beautiful. I remember these same kinds of arguments here in the US back in the bra-burning days of the 1970s. Anyway, because of the new marriage law, I will predict that within 2 or 3 decades, marriages in China will be rare. The birth rate will be even lower than it is today. Women will be everywhere in government, and they will be coming apart as a nation. Number 14. Every so often, I slow down long enough to take a look at cryptocurrency, and it's always volatile, but it was very volatile over the next few months. I thought there was a point where it looked almost like it was effervescent, like bubbles in champagne, many, many bubbles. I'm not sure that's a good thing for cryptocurrency, but just be watching. Number 15. I saw a scene in this coming summer in which people were not mowing their yards. I thought this was irrelevant at first, but then wondered if they didn't have any gas or they didn't want to spend what money they had on gas for their mowers. Caused a lot of distress. Mowing the grass. Wow. Number 16. I don't usually say much about big energy shifts because so many people can't feel those energy shifts. But we are undergoing a shift from which many people will not return. This is not to say they will die. What I'm saying is that they're going to change in a deep, committed way. And they're not going to go back to expecting the old order or the familiar ways of life to be reestablished. I'm not sure how much people understand that a given reality exists within the parameters of a given set of frequencies. And when you begin to expand consciousness, you tap into hybrid regions where the frequencies of third and fourth or fourth and fifth overlap. So as we ascend, quote unquote, ascend, we don't really go anywhere. Instead, we are able to tap, feel, respond to, and use a wider and often higher range of frequencies. But when trouble strikes, and that's now, those who haven't been introduced to higher consciousness will struggle. They'll shut down, freeze, cry, curse, fight, etc. On the other hand, those who have been working to ascend or to expand will also struggle, but it will be a struggle to open further. In the process, they will frantically call to the universe. They'll try to trust, to watch or listen for guidance, to take the steps and the guidance they receive, and they will cry in relief when the situation changes for the better. But inch by inch, those who make the effort to expand will come to use their consciousness much more deliberately, to trust that something out there is listening, and to count on that something to help build a new future. And in a nutshell, that is what is happening this year. Many, many people awakening, many expanding. Yeah, a little chaos to manage, but keep your chin up. And that's it for this look-see. So for those who are watching or listening for the first time, the look-see is a brief look at what's happening in our world and where the big trends are headed. Reality isn't fixed. It's very dynamic and it changes according to what we are doing with our consciousness. Nothing becomes real until we make it real. We make a choice. We take some kind of action. We put something together or take it apart. Those decisive actions are what determine the path and the outcome. And of course, once we set something in motion, it takes a lot to make a change or get things going in some other direction. And that is exactly the reason for looking ahead. If we don't like the direction things are going, we can make appropriate changes in a timely way or prepare for what looks inevitable. If we see something we like, we can put some conscious attention on that outcome and help things along. It's important to look ahead and assess what's happening and where we are going so we know whether or not we need to do something different. So thank you so much for listening. Keep your eyes open and keep your wits about you. We'll see you in April. Take care.